Hey guys, welcome to CPAP Choice. It's Pappy. Hey, I'm remaking my Journey into Rest video, CPAP, RA, and me. We went HD. This is one of the ones I just wanted to remake. I think I can do a lot better job with the content, and hey, it's an HD too. So this video is really, hey, it's my personal story. It's my journey into rest, and it's going to explain a lot of things about why Pappy started CPAP Choice, why I'm passionate, about this obscure, this sometimes ugly medical treatment of CPAP and and sleep apnea. So hey, this is my story. This is the reason why Pappy's doing the things that he's doing. CPAP has helped me so incredibly. And by the end of the story, hopefully you'll understand. Hopefully you'll have some insight. One little disclaimer going in. Hey guys, my results aren't typical, and some of it, that's a reason why the story needs to be told. But I need to put that disclaimer on it too, because this isn't a, CPAP isn't a cure-all. It's not even a cure really. I mean, it is a treatment, and there's a difference between a treatment and a cure. And sleep apnea isn't a disease; it's a condition. And a disease, hey, it can be cured. Sleep apnea, hey, there's some other things out there that there are possibly cures. Surgery, the UP3 surgeries, hey, that's a possible cure for a lot of people. But this is Pappy's personal story. So it really begins, it probably starts about 15 years ago. Really, when I first started to see signs of sleep apnea in me, I'd wake up at night. If I was sitting upright and was really relaxed and doing something, I'd notice I could hear my heart beat, here in my esophagus, and hey, I think that was the first sign. Where it really started was 10 years ago. I got married. My wife is an RN. We started sharing, our lives, including sleeping together, and she first noted, as an RN, she knew what sleep apnea was. I had no clue, and she started to tell me, hey, I had to wake you up last night and roll you over, because you quit breathing as you slept. And we were newly married. To people who struggle with CPAP, who avoid it. I talked to one sleep tech. He stated that on the second night of titration, that 25% of the people who had a diagnosis of sleep apnea, they brought him in, sat him down for their second night of study. They showed him an introductory video about, what is sleep apnea, about CPAP therapy. They showed them the ins and outs of it, and 25% of the people stood up and walked out. Hey guys, don't feel like you're alone. I mean, I felt that way at first. I felt that way 10 years ago, and I would have saved myself a lot of pain had I, listened to my wife back then. Hey, we were newly married. The thought of introducing a CPAP machine and mask, into the private areas of our lives. That's the reason why CPAP Choice comes from you, from Pappy's bedroom. Hey, this is the place that CPAP happens. This is the place that we were choking and dying in our sleep, and that's the reason why it's always shot here. I could be downstairs sitting next to a nice fish tank, get some good backgrounds going. We live in a beautiful state, but this is the place that it happens, and this is the place that CPAP Choice comes to you. So, but 10 years ago, she said, hey, you quit breathing when you sleep. We looked into it. At the time, we were underinsured. It was roughly $1,000 for the sleep test, for the polysomnogram, and then on top of that, it'd be rental equipment that was out of pocket. We were newly married. We had an instant family. We had another child on the way. My wife was pregnant at the time. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I can't take the money out of the family budget. This is a big chunk of change. It's an ugly therapy. I can't take the money out of the family budget so I can just get a good night's sleep. And that was where I left it. I did, choose to do, I learned enough to do some positional therapy. I learned how to sleep on my side. And that seems like it was enough for a number of years. But, some changes happened. And, hey, let's talk about that here. 4 years ago, we returned from one of the southwestern states, to one of the Rocky Mountain states. I started a business, and basically I failed the business. Money was flying out the door by tens of thousands of dollars, and and I had to return to work. And at the time, it was a difficult job market. Still is. this is about 3 or 4 years ago, and returned to work, and I was working as a machinist, and it was one of the only jobs I could find. My real background is in testing and measurement. So, hey, you hear Pappy talking about all this stuff and in technical terms. Hey, Pappy's a technical guy. I spent some time at Texaco Research, IBM Manufacturing Engineering, a small company called Team Labs that did testing and measurement for educational science equipment. And Pappy's just a technical guy. So, hey, when you hear me talk about these technical things, it's second nature to me. Looking at test results, looking at graphs, that's old hat. There's a lot of stuff that refers to, specifically about CPAP that, hey, I understand a lot better because of my background. So I was working as a machinist. I'd worked there for about 6 months, 9 months as a temp. I'd just gotten hired on full time. I've been there for a year. Things were working out pretty well. Learning how to do that. I mean, it's while you might have equipment experience, hey, being a machinist is different. So I learned all that, and hey, I was right getting into doing some quality work and working away and paying off the household stuff, and like I say, I was in a good financial position. But one of the things that happened was that I went to work one day, and throughout the last 3 days of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, during the work week, my ankle had swelled up, and it was pretty painful. I got there on Friday. I was glad to head home. By Friday night, my ankle had swelled up. I mean, it looked like it had a half of an orange, underneath my skin on my ankle. I went to the emergency room that night. They gave me some steroids. Gave me some painkillers. They saw, something that I've come to recognize. They saw an elevated uric acid level. They said, "Hey, it looks like gout to us." I said, "Gout? What's gout?" Went home and learned about gout. The steroids worked. The painkillers worked to keep me out of misery. It was so swollen that at one time I leaned my foot over the side of the emergency room bed, and if I hadn't been looking at it, I would have sworn it had caught fire right there. That's how bad it hurt. So a couple days later, I followed up with my doctor on that Monday, and I went back to work on Tuesday, and I was feeling 100%. By that next Friday, my hip swelled up, just about the same as my ankle had done. It was very painful. I was on crutches. Went back to my family doctor that next Saturday, and he said, "Wow, whatever's going on here isn't normal." And he immediately, he had a really good heads up. He referred me to a rheumatologist. Took a couple weeks to get in there, and by the time I went to the rheumatology appointment, my other hip had swelled up. And so I was on crutches. I could barely walk into that rheumatologist office. Other things started to happen. My hands started to hurt. My shoulders, knees, just about all my joints were affected. And the rheumatologist looked at me and he says, took some history. He said, well, there's a couple things that it could be. It could be reactive arthritis. I had a recent bout with strep throat, and he said it could be reactive arthritis. I said, well, what's that? Well, that's when your immune system reacts to the infection that you had, and instead of attacking the disease, it starts to attack your joints. And I said, wow, that sounds pretty serious. How long is it going to be before I can get back on my feet and get back to work? And he didn't have a clear answer for me. He said, we'll start doing this. He started me on steroids almost permanently. For over a month, I was on 60 milligrams of prednisone. And, boy, that was hard. I swelled up like a balloon, put on all kinds of weight. It still didn't help 100%. It took a lot of the swelling down, but hey, it gives you some complications. And, I wasn't able to return to work right away. And, being a small company, they let me go, after only 2 weeks of being out, getting sick and having an illness. And, and hey, I don't fault them. I do understand. I mean, it was a small company. They needed people that needed the work done. That was their income. Hey, I understand. Actually, I'm still in contact with those people today. One of the hardest things was while this was going on in that 2 week period, the day that they had let me go, we were actually in the hospital for my wife was having foot surgery, and we were down in the depths of the surgery center, and I was explaining to my father-in-law, who was there for his daughter's surgery, about what was happening with me health-wise.